everyone, and welcome back to Astrology Sphere. So I hope you're all well and that you're coping okay with this self-isolation and social distancing that a lot of us are having to sort of deal with. Kind of a strange time, and it really makes me think about the Saturn in Aquarius themes that I talked about in my last video. The important thing to know is that just before the new moon, the moon will make a sextile to Saturn, which is now in Aquarius. So it's really going to activate that energy that I was talking about in my Saturn ingress video. So you might want to just go back and have a look at that to see what kind of energies are likely to be kind of working with the new moon, from the 24th onwards for the next 2 weeks, certainly. Now, the moon will enter Aries kind of in the early morning of the 24th of March. So it will enter Aries at about 1 a.m. and that's GMT, and then it will sextile Saturn in Aquarius. So really activating that Saturn in Aquarius ingress. And I think it's important to bear this energy in mind through the next 2 weeks as the moon starts to wax. And I think there's a couple of ways of looking at the Saturn energy. So number one is as a kind of purifier. So Saturn asking us to let go or release or sort of skin back what isn't necessary, what isn't working, let go of the old, and that includes fear, scarcity mentality, which we've seen a lot of with this kind of panic buying at the supermarkets, that type of thing. Yeah, this sort of attachment to material stuff. Aquarius is a sign about detachment. So I think we really need to start kind of getting our heads around the fact that this is less about the material, and it's more about the more sort of ephemeral aspects of kind of brotherly love, sharing, community, all that kind of stuff. So keying into that more than it's kind of getting fixated about, do we have enough paracetamol, and do we have enough kind of groceries, and kind of getting more into that mentality of collaboration, of sharing information, being helpful, helping neighbors, doing what we can to keep people's spirits up. So doing some light work, social media posts, videos, producing entertainment that can help people during periods of social isolation, checking up on relatives and family that live alone, that type of thing. And then the other aspect of Saturn, which I did get into quite a lot in my video about the Saturn ingress, is really keying into this idea of sort of the importance of boundaries, limits, and rules and regulations. In as much as it's not really something that's terribly popular in this day and age. We're kind of fixated with this idea of liberalism and freedoms, but even freedoms come with responsibility. And I think when we consider this, there's quite a lot in the media at the moment about people still socializing and meeting in groups, even though they've been asked to kind of self-isolate in order to stop the spread of coronavirus. In the sense, boundaries and rules, are perhaps necessary for the greater good of all. It might not be terribly fun, but it certainly might be necessary when it comes to just, helping to safeguard those older members of society who are, potentially put at risk when we younger people expose ourselves to a virus which we may not suffer from terribly, but which could mean sort of life or death to somebody who's older. So that's just something to bear in mind. So the new moon itself, I kind of feel as though what it's doing is it's asking us to think about life force energy in the body, because of course the moon is really the mistress of the sublunar sphere. So in other words, the earthly realm. So she's mistress of the body, she's mistress of our diet, kind of everyday habits, and our subconscious thoughts. So something that really kind of occurred to me in the last few days is how important both the Sun and Mars are when it comes to the vitality of the body. and both are quite active at the moment. You know, the sun is in Aries, which is exalted. It's exalted here, and then Aries is ruled by Mars. And Mars is very active with this conjunction to Pluto, and before that to Jupiter. So you know, if we think about sort of well, I hate to say medieval cosmology because it's not. It kind of goes back right to sort of Platonic times, kind of early Greek medicine, you know, with things like the humors and the elements and that kind of thing. That so the sun in this cosmology is considered to be really very healing. It's the most healing planet in the pantheon. So that's just something to bear in mind, you know, as we kind of go forward. Then Mars is about kind of life force, vitality. It rules the blood, and of course the sun rules the heart. So you can see that the two things are kind of interlinked. You've got the heart, which is the pump which circulates the blood, and you've got the blood which then takes the energy from the heart round the body. So it takes nutrients and it takes oxygen around the body, and then it collects waste products and then circulates them to other parts of the body, other organs. So essentially Mars, in terms of the blood, is actually what connects everything in the body. And you could see the body as almost a community of organs that all work together to make the whole kind of system function efficiently. So it's really important that both the heart and the blood are sort of working properly, but also that we're putting the right things into the body that can be circulated in the blood, and that kind of thing. And so I thought I'd read you something from Marsilio Ficino, who was a Renaissance physician, but also an astrologer and a practitioner of sympathetic magic, because I think he has some really interesting things to say about the sun that might be useful when it comes to thinking about how you want to protect yourself, and what remedies you might want to take to sort of boost your immune system at this time, you know, with coronavirus.
So in his kind of medical / astrological treatise, which was called On Obtaining Life from the Heavens, Ficino writes about the healing power of the sun, and he writes, "If you want your body and spirit to receive power from some member of the cosmos, say from the sun, seek the things which are above all most solar amongst metals and gems, still more among plants, and more yet among animals, and especially among human beings, for surely things which are more similar to you confer more of it." So he then says that this needs to be brought to bear externally, so in other words, like wearing solar crystals or charms, or wearing gold, for example, or wearing colors such as yellow, solar colors, yellow, red, orange, and so far as possible taken internally, especially in the day and the hour of the sun, and while the sun is dominant in the theme of the heavens. So essentially what this means is choosing the day of the sun, which is Sunday, and then preferably the hour of the sun on the day of the sun. So the hour of the sun is based on the planetary hours system, which happens twice a day, and you can normally find that out from there are quite a few apps that will tell you the planetary hours every day. And then while the sun is dominant in the theme of the heavens, so this is when the sun is kind of prominent astrologically, and of course right now the sun is prominent astrologically because it's in Aries, which is where it is exalted. So something like that, or the sun being in Leo, for example, there would be another time when the sun is dominant, or of course at midday, because this is when the sun is dominant in the sky. And then he says you should frequently perceive and think about these things and love them above all. And he adds, crucially, you should also get a lot of light. And we will see when we come to the next bit of this why that is so important. But I do think it's interesting, I just wanted to kind of add as an aside, that Marsilio Ficino himself had Saturn in Aquarius natally, and it was rising with his ascendant. So to me that's an enormous kind of confirmation that we need to heed his advice at this particular time in our history. The other thing, of course, is that he's Italian, and Italy's been one of the countries that's been hardest hit when it comes to the coronavirus, when it comes to Europe. So lots to think about there. So below is a list of the various solar things that are kind of part of the the cosmology. Ficino's the cosmology that was part of the astrological cosmos, and was how Ficino understood the way things worked. So you can see he's divided it into mineral, plant or vegetable, animal and human, and he includes everything from crystals and mineral, kind of metals like gold, chrysolite, amber, to herbs and plants such as St. John's wort, sunflowers, cinnamon, and so on. And then it kind of goes right through to people that are considered to be solar, which in astrological terms would be anyone who's got a lot of diurnal zodiac signs or planets in their charts, such as, for example, people who are Sun Aries or people who are Sun Leo. Now it's really interesting because I happened to be reading an article recently from the PubMed website, and it talks about the benefits of sunlight, and more and more evidence is actually starting to emerge from the scientific community that melatonin seems to be very important when it comes to fighting the immune response which COVID-19 seems to kind of elicit in the body. So people are kind of talking about taking melatonin supplements, but actually you could also just expose yourself to sunlight for about half an hour a day, and this will generate the precursor to melatonin, which is serotonin, which will not only make you feel good because it's the kind of the natural antidepressant, but it will also mean that you sleep better at night because you'll then produce melatonin. So exposure in the morning seems to be the best way to kind of benefit. So I just thought I'd read you a little bit from an article about the benefits of sunlight, because I just think it's so interesting, how they're kind of carrying through the mythology, which is so part and parcel of astrology and the cosmos in which Ficino was working. So it starts off by saying, each day Apollo's fiery chariot makes its way across the sky, bringing life-giving light to the planet. For the ancient Greeks and Romans, Apollo was the god of medicine and healing, as well as of sun and light. Apollo could bring sickness as well as cure, and today scientists have come to a similarly dichotomous recognition that exposure to the ultraviolet radiation in sunlight has both beneficial and deleterious effects on human health. And then of course they talk about things like skin cancer and so on, but there's increasing evidence to show that in fact sunlight also has a host of benefits, including vitamin D production, which is actually also produced through the skin through exposure to sunlight in much the same way as as plants. It's kind of a type of photosynthesis in which the body then produces vitamin D, which is a very important part of our immune system. So they say for most white-skinned people, a half hour in the summer sun in a bathing suit can initiate the release of 50,000 IUs of vitamin D into the circulation within 24 hours of exposure. And of course the recommended doses of vitamin D are now much higher than they used to be. They're now saying at least 25 UG, or I think it's something like 3,000 IUs a day, but ideally double that. So not only are you kind of producing vitamin D, but you also are you're also producing serotonin and then melatonin. And the article does actually go into that. I'm just trying to find the right bit. They do add as well that you don't necessarily have to go in the sun. You can sit in front of a UV lamp, which is what I do in the winter because I suffer from seasonal affective disorder. So you can actually buy UV light bulbs and UV lamps that you can sit in front of. But somewhere in here they talk about serotonin. Here, so they talk about the sleep-wake cycle, and they're talking about the circadian rhythm, and they're saying that The pineal hormone, or the pineal gland, is a key pace setter for many of the body's circadian rhythms, and it also plays an important role in countering infection, inflammation, cancer, and autoimmunity. This is based on a study, a 2006 study. And then it also goes on and says, finally, melatonin suppresses UV ray-induced skin damage, according to research. So when people are exposed to sunlight or very bright artificial light in the morning, their nocturnal melatonin production occurs sooner, and they enter into sleep more easily at night. Melatonin production also shows a seasonal variation relative to the availability of light, with the hormone produced for a longer period in the winter than in the summer. So they kind of go on and they say the melatonin precursor serotonin is also affected by exposure to daylight. Normally produced during the day, serotonin is only converted to melatonin in darkness. So what they're saying is that at night you need low light levels in order to produce melatonin. So you shouldn't be exposed to blue light, for example, from computer screens and television screens too late, because this can affect melatonin production. And ideally you want to be in lower light rather than sort of very bright lamps and things like that as well, to kind of get you into that sort of sleepy phase. So they go on and they say, with our modern day penchant for indoor activity and staying up well past dusk, nocturnal melatonin production is typically far from robust. The light we get from being outside on a summer day can be 1,000 times brighter than we're ever likely to experience indoors. For this reason, it's important that people who work indoors get outside periodically, and moreover, that we all try to sleep in total darkness. This can have a major impact on melatonin rhythms and can result in improvements in mood, energy, and sleep quality. And it would seem, if the studies are correct, according to this Dr. Anton, who's done a video on YouTube about COVID-19 and the latest research, it would also seem as though melatonin is a very important factor in counteracting the kind of exacerbated inflammatory response that COVID-19 causes in the body, which leads to the problems with the airways, the passages in the lungs, and that type of thing. So I really think that there may well be something in this. Of course, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a health practitioner, so I'm just sharing this with you out of interest in case it's of use to you. But I would also refer you to this article, which is available, as I said, on the PubMed website. And it's called The Benefits of Sunlight, A Bright Spot for Human Health, and it was originally published in Environmental Health Perspectives, volume 160, number 4, which was published in April 2008. So, I just thought I'd share that with you in case it was helpful. And then at the new moon itself, the sun and the moon will be making a conjunction to Chiron and Black Moon Lilith. Now, I did talk a little bit about these during my February full moon forecast, I think, the Leo supermoon. But just to kind of reiterate that, Black Moon Lilith changed signs at the end of January this year, and it will be in Aries until until September. And during this time, it's going to be making an interesting dance with Chiron. And if you kind of think about it, these are almost like the two sort of shamans or healers of the in astrology. So Chiron is associated with the wounded healer, so the shaman. So this is quite kind of traditionally masculine kind of energy because it's associated with the centaur. And then we've got Black Moon Lilith, which is almost like the witch or the pagan, the female pagan. So this is kind of sexuality, and it's also sort of dealing with all those difficult to grasp emotions that we often don't want to own, like jealousy, rage, anger, the things that we tend to kind of project onto others. So if you think about how people are kind of almost being forced back into survival mode and are kind of going to the supermarkets and kind of panic buying, this is a kind of an expression of
this black moon energy. And I think it's going to be really important over the next 2 weeks to really try and work and transmute this energy so that it's not so counterproductive and doesn't get people into a place of fear and scarcity, because that's not really going to help anybody else, and it's probably not going to make you feel terribly great either. So I think it's going to be crucial during this time to really think of ways that you can start to kind of own those energies, own those fears, and work with them constructively. Everybody's going through the same thing, so just to sort of be mindful of that, and think about how you can kind of add to the solution rather than be part of the problem. I think that's probably the best way to sort of say that. But I am wishing you lots of healing and resilience and uplifting solar rays, and I guess I'll see you in a couple of weeks for the full moon forecast. Till then, be well and be safe.